What is going on, boys and girls? BN, I'm back again today. I hope all of y'all are out there risking it to get that biscuit on a daily basis, and always more importantly, NIK. And so today I want to talk about some kingdom management topics, which, one, let me preface as well with what we're going to talk about by starting off and showing you a screenshot. So this was taken from our S8 Kingdom Discord, which is more of our S8 councils for basically any R5s and R4s of any alliances that are in the kingdom. And this is so we can try to communicate information to all of the active alliances and their leaders and their officers, right, as efficiently and as seamlessly as we can. So this post reads, because the intense siege program of HLS will end, everyone knows that the resources from these cities are useless. My alliance now also receives 1.1 million of resources per day from cities, but this is too little. I am collecting RSS at least 32 mil an hour, so 30 mil a day. SS earns 912 resources from cities daily, but which SS member would say it works? So what this person is referring to is the way that we've gone about distributing cities in Server 8. Let me start there. So there's 80 cities total on a map. If you divide that by 5, right, if we're going off of each resource type, right, which is the food, the wood, the stone, iron, and gold, gives us 5 resources. We divide that by 5, we get 16. This means that the way that we have it in S8 is we have the top 16 alliances get up to 5 cities each. This means that the top 9 alliances will have one of each because there's 9 capitals on a server, which means 9 gold production cities. And then we do 5 for number 10 through 16. This means that 10 through 16 may double, triple, or have two double resources at any point. And that's just because with the 71 cities left, increments of 4, it just doesn't work out right. You're either going to get 68 or 72. So there's going to be a little off there. But this is the way that we do it. And the reason why is because if you have 16 alliances at max capacity at 150, you reach 2,400 players. This means that with us giving more alliances cities, we have a higher chance of retaining more activity in the long run. Now, if your server is front-loading or you're going with like a mega alliance style structure because that's just the way your server's developing, right? There's really no organization or distribution of cities, then it's probably going to most likely end up just becoming one of the type of server where just the top alliances have the best cities, right? Or the number 1 or number 2 alliances have the best cities, right? As we've seen in some older servers. So just keep in mind that if you have less than 16 alliances that you're splitting cities with, your potential for the amount of retention of active players you can keep is probably going to be less, right? Or it's going to at least have a higher percentage chance of being less. So this is why we've come up with the system the way we have. Now, once server versus server comes out, right, I think like most people who have experience in Kingdom Builders, right, we will have a redistribution plan for that as well. And I'll probably talk about that in a later video. But to keep the focus here on the resource portion from what this player was talking about in the screenshot is that, and this really comes from the perspective of that like, faction power doesn't really mean anything in the long run, right? Because in the beginning of a server, as most of us know, you have the City Siege event, which the max there is you have to hit 500 faction power and you get the top rewards, and then you have Supreme Alliance, right, which goes for double the amount of time, I think it is, if not more, than City Siege. And that's just, I think that's like 21 days or something like that, but essentially what happens is like it just goes off the faction power leaderboard, right? So you get paid out for green gems and other rewards, I think, based on that. Now, the only time faction power comes into play after that is in a very limited way from Chronicles, and that's for Chronicle 13, 16, and 19. Now, each of these Chronicles, as a secondary objective, not a primary, are for the one alliance. For any alliances, excuse me. This is for members of any alliance, as it says, all in this kingdom, all members of alliances that reach 700 faction power will receive extra rewards, right? And you can see that, right, no one reached 700 faction power, right? But the challenge is look at the wording. In this kingdom, that means that whichever kingdom wins, meets the primary objective, only alliances within that kingdom that are at this faction power or more can get these secondary objective rewards. Now, the secondary objective rewards are just little icing on the cake, right? I personally don't see those as being extremely focused, right? Like, we need to absolutely get this, right? So, but if you are trying to, then the way that reaching Chronicles 13, 16, and 19 would pay out is if you have one faction, right, that is basically kind of the primary or the ruling faction in your server, and you're just trying to convert everyone to that faction. In my opinion, I just don't really see that as potentially being maybe the best play long game, because one, we just don't know how server versus server is going to play out. Maybe there's benefit in having one faction be the main faction in your server, and it's just that. Maybe running two factions, maybe having all three factions is going to have benefit. And I think some things to keep in mind is that, remember, each faction has a buff, right, for shieldmen, spearmen, or cavalry, right? So you are, in a sense, by running three factions, right, there's some natural counters there to potential lineups from the buffs that you'll get from those factions. So it just depends on how you want to play it. But I just wanted to explain that because I've had some players come to me and say, well, we're ranked low on the faction power leaderboard, and I explained to them, faction power doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day because there's no additional rewards that you get from faction power, right? And faction power really isn't an appropriate way to gauge an alliance's strength or presence in a server for the most part as well. And so now let me get into why the city thing. This is a point, right? When you have someone who was a previous lead that talks about the lack of resources, right? What that means is that, and this is kind of the indirect part that you read from that, but reading between the lines is they probably want more cities, right? Or they probably think that they should have higher resource production from the cities that they currently have. Now, in our server, let me see where the threshold increases to, which should be, let's see here. So once we hit 7, I think this can go to 8, yeah. So the max now increases to 8 once we finish 15. Once we finish, is it 18? Once we finish 18, then the max city level can go to 10. I think that might be it too. Let me just double check. Yeah. So the max city level is going to be 10. This is when 3 level 8 cities are higher, right? So keep in mind, the resource production is going to increase, and we haven't even at this point hit going to 8 yet, right? The highest we can go to is getting buildings to 7, right? And then once we hit this and 2 more level 6s, it'll increase. So keep in mind, resource production at level 10, you'll be able to eventually get all the cities in a server to level 10 over time. Right, so resource production is going to increase. That's first and foremost, right? So I think this type of a post is a little premature because we haven't even gotten to a point where we can see what the average maximum resource output is for all of the cities once the end game hits, right? And cities have been equally distributed. All the cities have got to level 10, right? And then we're really kind of gauging it at that point. In addition to this, with you have to value the health of your server versus, right, and also on top of that, the retention of activity versus how many cities do we want to give to alliances to strike hopefully somewhat of a good balance, right? Now, in our server, with us aiming to try and include the top 16 alliances, it doesn't mean that that may be the way it is forever. But I think it's a good approach because, keep in mind, it's a lot easier to condense or to lower the amount of alliances that have cities than it is to increase. And the reason why is because when you start out with a lower number and you're increasing, you are taking cities away from other alliances and giving them to others. If you start out with more alliances with city distribution, that means more alliances have less, but if you condense, now they get more, right? So it's almost like going in with extremely low expectations, but then coming out ahead in the end, right? You're always happy when you come farther out ahead than it would be if you're losing or having less than what you started with. And that's just like a majority perspective on it. And so I think that is why the approach that we're taking in Server 8 for how we're going about city distribution, for why things like faction power after a certain point don't really matter, and why it's good to have a solid long-term vision on how a server or a kingdom is going to develop, because there's multiple factors that play into it. But the challenge sometimes is really just taking time to explain and to educate information for players that either just haven't or just are not seeing the bigger picture, or even if they just don't have a lot of kingdom building experience when it comes to managing kingdoms or servers kind of at the top or more at like the higher management levels. Because right now, for me, when I talk to a lot of my When we talk to like our syndicate family alliances, even our SA council chat, and even people I talk to on a daily basis, people like Shadow and Gibbles, Immigrant, others, right, that are in kind of our daily, or if not other, every other day voice calls, is these are things we talk about, is kind of end game plans on how we're going to how are we going to come up with fun events, fun guidelines, right, or beneficial guidelines, better yet, right, that are going to be able to have a good impact on as many players as possible, right? So as many players can reap rewards, as many players can reap the advantages of what we have built in Server 8, right? Like, we don't have Civil War all the time, right? Players can freely develop here, along with us already preparing for when Server vs. Server comes out, right? These are the things that, in my opinion, I think Kingdoms and servers really should be focusing on, instead of, because this is and I'll leave you with this as the very last thing, because I know I'm approaching about 11 minutes here, is spenders, right? This is the pro tip I'm going to leave you at the end. If you are planning to spend money, right, and I'll probably make another video about this that's going to go in depth, but I'll leave you with this nugget, is that as a spender, right, top alliances or anyone that's going into a server with a big group, you are in a sense like an indirect financial advisor, right? This is some of the reasons why, like when I was playing Rock, doing jumpers there, doing big jumper projects there. For those of you guys who know my experience, right? I mean, I've organized 300 to 450 player jump groups across 3 kingdoms, right? That, you know, we ended with fantastic retention at the end in our final. But I would tell people, as we started to do this more and more, once we got into our second jump and beyond, was we would tell people, don't spend money, right, until the kingdom is like a couple weeks developed. Because even now, I have people that play IK and they've come to me, they spend money and they're like, hey, should I stay here in this server because of how it's playing out? Or should I stop spending money and then make a new account potentially in server 8 or another server and then spend money there because the server is more stabilized, right? There is nothing worse. I don't want to say worse, but there's nothing more than like a sad feeling if you're someone who spends a good amount of money, and then you come to realize like, wow, this server is not really panning out the way I was maybe hoping it was going to pan out on, and now I'm questioning on whether or not I'm going to keep spending money or furthering my investment. Right, that is the other thing you really have to consider. I've had people that have stopped spending money in their servers just to make a new account in server 8 to then start spending money here, right, because of the way that our server is set up. And they know that they're going to get max developmental value and progression value out of their account here than in like the warring server they're in, right, or just a completely kind of unknown server they're in. So just something to keep in mind. I'll probably make a more detailed video about it later, but I just wanted to share kind of some kingdom building managing knowledge and experience with you, and then talk about a certain topic that I think is something that will help everyone. So as always, if you guys enjoy the content, man, please go ahead, hit me with a sub, turn that notification bell on so you guys can get updates on when new videos are coming out, and also check our IK official information in the description down below. And you can also join our Server 8 Discord if you guys want to join in on our weekly Tuesday Town Hall meetings that we do for Infinity Kingdom, along with if you want to get updates on when new content comes out or just chat with us. Right, we're always a bundle of joy and a basket of hugs, Care Bear style, all the time. Until next video, I'm out. Peace.